For a dynasty, it actually has an advantage because one of the features of Islamic law about slavery is it says that a slave has no lineage. It's almost as if the Ottoman dynasty achieved a form of asexual production.
Nowadays, in the Western world, we kind of think the harem as a pleasure den of the ruler. It was, in fact, an institution in which reproduction of the Ottoman dynasty was planned and enforced.
The harem women were Christian slaves, either taken as prisoners of war or brought to the palace by government officials seeking favors.
The Ottoman sultans and their concubines followed this very particular policy by which each concubine could only have one son. And the minute she's produced a son, she no longer sleeps with the sultan. No two princes should be disadvantaged by having to share a mother. In other words, every prince deserves his own mother.
The word harem means forbidden, and the Sultan's harem was housed in a beautiful but very restricted complex within Topkapi Palace. Chosen for their beauty, the women of the harem were converted to Islam and schooled in the Quran. Their role was to tend to the Sultan and provide sex.
They would be very attractive. Many of them were taught singing, perhaps playing a musical instrument.
Accommodations within the harem were lush, especially the rooms where the Sultan was entertained. Loud fountains in the windows prevented eavesdropping on private moments. At its height, over 1,000 women lived in the harem, but few actually slept with the Sultan.
If a girl were successful, she might rise to a very powerful position. She might be the concubine of the Sultan and the mother of the next Sultan. It was like every little girl dressing up to be a princess, except she would have to be a slave princess.
There was a strict hierarchy within the group. The most beautiful and highly trained women were allowed to sleep with the Sultan once. Among those who bore him a son, his favorites became Hasaki. These were the closest the Sultan would come to having a traditional marriage. As the size and influence of the Ottoman Empire grew, stories of concubines and the Sultan's private harem spread. European writers spun lurid tales of beautiful and naked women, fueling the myth of orgies and debauchery.
Well, this fantasy of the Sultan surrounded by naked women, I think probably for the most part that didn't happen, but there certainly were 1 or 2 or 3 sultans for whom that was a reality.
But overall, the harem operated according to strict moral codes of Islam.
First of all, you have to just get out of your mind that this is something immoral or reprobate. Islamic law recognizes to reproduce with concubines as a legitimate phenomenon. A man can take a female slave as a sex partner if she is willing. And then if he has children by her, those children are legitimate if he acknowledges them.
The Sultan had his own private path into the harem, known as the Golden Road. The only other men allowed entrance were castrated male slaves called eunuchs, who guarded, protected, and trained the concubines. The chief eunuchs sometimes became high-ranking officers of the empire, serving just under the Grand Vizier or the Sultan's chief minister. This was a highly regimented world, until Suleiman placed his handkerchief on the shoulder of a Ukrainian slave girl named Roxolana. He instructed her to return it to his quarters that night, and thus began a romance that would change the course of the empire forever.
She becomes his great love, and very special things are done for her. He breaks with a number of previous customs, traditions for her.
The Sultan sold all his concubines as virgins and committed to an unprecedented monogamous relationship with Roxolana. She produced 6 children with him.
People didn't quite understand why this Sultan is having so many children with her, why he's honoring her, and they start to call her Cadı, which is Turkish for witch.
Then, in 1534, Suleiman made a highly controversial choice. He and Roxolana were officially married.
Roxolana was not apparently so extraordinary a beauty as to inspire the sort of passion and devotion that the Sultan was said to have lavished upon her, and therefore it was speculated that she may have had some training in the arts of enchantment that enabled her to capture the Sultan's heart in so vigorous a fashion.
Whatever her wiles, Roxolana became a powerful force in the empire.
Roxolana was smart, and she was very, very knowledgeable about political intrigue. We know for a fact that she got involved into palace politics, and some scholars even believe that she played a role in the killing of Süleyman's own son, Mustafa, and to make place for her own sons.
Süleyman accepts rumors that Mustafa is plotting to overthrow him, and he has Mustafa executed. This is a devastating thing to have to do. Roxolana gets blamed for this. She's one of the people who's saying to Süleyman, you know, Mustafa's trying to get rid of you.
After Mustafa's execution, Roxolana's own son, Bayezid, died under mysterious circumstances, leaving Roxolana's favorite son, Selim, as the only surviving heir.
I mean, we are talking about Ottoman palace politics. You have to be smart, you have to be calculating, you have to be vicious in order to survive. Roxolana can be seen as a manipulative lady, but you have to be a manipulative lady in order to survive in that environment.
Suleiman's loyalty to his wife never wavered. When Roxolana died, she was buried in a tomb designed for a queen. 8 years later, in 1566, the Ottoman Empire's greatest leader died in his sleep while on campaign in Hungary. He was 72.
Sultan Süleyman really sought to create a world empire. It was certainly a single reign marked by the greatest territorial expansion. It was marked by an extraordinary degree of institutional innovation and organization. Süleyman's reign is a zenith.
Suleiman's 46-year reign saw dramatic advances in law and in art and architecture. He left behind an empire far more European than the one he inherited. But the infighting and intrigue that had plagued European monarchies would soon visit the palace of Suleiman's successors. The 46-year reign of Suleiman the Magnificent marked the peak of the Ottoman Empire. For 2.5 centuries, through the reign of 10 sultans, the empire's growth had been fueled by the spoils of war. Now there was nothing left to conquer.
It simply wasn't possible to keep on conquering. There had to be a change. They were up against borders in Europe, and they were up against borders with Iran. They were going to waste their budget on unnecessary wars.
Constant campaigning had honed the Ottoman war machine into an invincible force. Now idle, it declined rapidly, failing to modernize either its tactics or technology.
By the end of the 16th century, the Ottomans actually are surpassed by their foreign enemies, and they lose that military edge.
Sultans no longer led their armies in battle.
The Sultan is no longer the warrior king on horseback leading his troops on the frontiers, as they were in the reign of Suleiman. The Sultan basically stays in Istanbul and is the figurehead in a system that really is being run and controlled by others.
And that system, the military and civil institutions that were so effective in building the empire, proved incapable of maintaining it. By the late 16th century, the Ottoman Empire, unable to meet the challenge of change, entered a centuries-long period of slow decline. One by one, its institutions failed. Among the first, the Ottoman tradition of dynastic succession. Fratricide may have been brutal, but it had served the Ottomans well, providing an unbroken string of 10 powerful sultans.
One of the things that contested succession did crude and barbaric as it seems to us, is it tended to eliminate weak candidates to rulership. Name me any European monarchy that had an unbroken succession of 10 able kings.
In 1595, the most violent dynastic killings in the history of the empire put an end to fratricide. Mehmet III came to power after murdering 19 young princes.
The wails and cries of the people of the city were doubled and tripled on this funeral. They simply could not bear to see this procession of coffins coming out of the palace. Some of them are this big. So it must have been terrible. And I think that was one of the pressures that persuaded the dynasty to stop doing fratricide.